that.
Okay, so what were you saying?
Bro, you can choose any mic you want. It's not that deep. No, no.
This.
This is
Why?
this is you can't even do this.
See,
You
it's
have to
like
do
I'm going with it.
tube light was true. It's recording. I can't hear you though. So turn it on. It's dead.
Let's start.
Oh, this
I
is the
think that's going to be my, what do you say?
this.
Takiya Kalam. Hey guys, this is Shruti.
Okay. Three, two, one. Hey guys, this is Shruti.
I'm Khadija. Welcome back to another episode of Authors Connect by Shelf. Let's
Okay,
go.
that's the way we are planning to do it. It's authors connect by shelf instead of
Yeah.
shelf all alone. And today we have an amazing author who Khadija would like to introduce because she just loves her.
We are thrilled to introduce Emily, an aspiring new voice in the self-help world. Emily is an author of It's Not That Deep, a self-published book that encourages readers to simplify their thinking, reduce stress, and of course, focus on what truly matters in life.
Mhm. So that would be the introduction of the author. Now I think without any further ado, we should just jump into the actual podcast of her actually talking about her book and you learning more about her. And if you
Yeah,
guys have any
and
questions
just
for the
talking
author,
about it, just
yeah,
talking about the book will make you actually read the book
yeah,
because Emily is just a very interesting person.
yeah, that's true. That's true. You'd get to know that in the further few minutes. Just to remind you, we are dropping the Instagram of Emily in our description so that you can connect with her. If you have any questions, you can ask her. She's open to all of that. All right, guys. So, Jan, let's jump into the podcast. Three, two, one. Okay, we're not including any of this. Hey, Emily, welcome to the podcast. You're here for the second episode of Chef. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you guys?
We're good. We're good. So we were going through your Instagram and we came across this fascinating book of yours with a really, really fascinating title. It's not that deep. So what
Mhm.
goes behind that title?
Yeah. So that do know me, I think deeply about everything. Always have my whole life. Just not, I mean, yeah, probably an overthinker. Just anything I can, wrap my head around. And so as I've gotten older and kind of gone through my career, I've really had to challenge myself to not overthink things. I think it's so easy just to dive deep into thoughts that maybe you don't need to, and you're just, exhausting yourself. So when I was writing this book, it's kind of ironic, right? Because life is complex, life is hard, but and people can really only say it's not that deep when they've been through it, right? So I think this was a book I wrote after a chapter of my life where it was like a hard time, and I'd learned a lot of lessons, and finally going through all of that, I kind of came to terms that it's a privilege to be able to say it's not that deep because you've done the work where you can kind of give yourself a mental break and not have to go through that doom loop.
Mhm.
Um, I think we all get prone to that sometimes. So yeah.
That's true. That's true. The title is really very catchy and everything. We saw your cover also. The cover also really resonates with the theme of your book. So,
Yeah.
did you design it by yourself or did you hire someone for that?
So I actually went on Fiverr and found somebody. I told them, so I'm not like super into astrology, but I like it. I'm a Pisces, and it's always a running joke because deep water, right? And so when I designed the book, I kind of told my artist, I said, I really want something that looks like water but mountains at the same time, and I want it to have levels.
Uh-huh.
Like if you were like looking at kind of like a profile of the ocean. And I also really love mountains. Living in Arizona, there's mountains. I have a tattoo of mountains. So I like wanted to combine the two. And I really love nature. So I just the way he came up with a couple proofs and we just kind of morphed them all together and I really liked how it turned out. So yeah.
That's really, really pretty. Actually, Khadija, I had a question around your title.
Emily, I came across a very beautiful line from your book and it just stuck with me. It's a motivator for some people's life choices is fear. So, which made me think that how do you personally apply the philosophy of it's not that deep in your life
Hmm.
every
Yeah. So I guess I should probably go into a little bit about how I wrote the book and why during COVID, I think everybody's lives were turned upside down. I was a speech language pathologist at the time and was going through some really tough personal choices, personal life stuff that just, I'm just like everybody else, right? And so I lived in the Midwest, Indiana at the time, and kind of chose to pick up and move to Montana by myself. And it was intense, and I thought it was going to fix all my problems, and it definitely didn't. It did not fix my problems. It actually made me kind of go through it maybe a little bit tougher because I was by myself. I mean, Yellowstone and I became really good friends because I think I cried there like every weekend and full transparency. And so when I was making these choices, there's a quote that comes across my page a lot is if it makes you uncomfortable, you should do it. If it doesn't scare you, you're not trying, you're not growing. And so if you're inspired and something does scare you, right? I think there's two choices. If it's really, really scary, maybe take a moment to think about it and don't just pick up and move to 2 weeks in Montana like I did. Maybe put a little thought behind that. I'm glad I did it. It taught me a lot. But I think a lot of people choose something because they're scared, or they'll not choose to do something because they're scared. And if it scares you, I think it really means to take a moment to pause, right? And what are your goals? Where do you want to go? What aligns with your truth? What are your core values? Like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And then make that choice. And if that choice still scares you, but it aligns with like where you want to go, you should make that choice. If it's something that's conflicting with who you are, then maybe find a different way, right? And so I think when it comes to fear, that usually I kind of talk about in the book, like it can make you anxious, right? And you're going to overthink and overthink. But if you are so true to yourself and aligned in who you are and who you think you want to be, then you shouldn't be that scared, right? You should just do it. You should just make that choice and move forward. It could be career, personal, and I'm not saying like, oh, you're scared to go jump off the cliff. Like, no, but sometimes you could jump off a shorter cliff and see where you end up, right?
Mhm.
day. Well, that's the reason it stuck with me.
Yeah. Because it's kind of conflicting, right? And I think that's the
Yeah.
irony of the book is it's not that deep, but it is, but it isn't, but it still is, right? And so that's kind of even at work, I have a lot of employees and I'll use that term a lot and they think I'm joking, like referring to my book. And I'm like, no, that's just how I feel. Like I'm not trying to be ironic right now because a lot of the choices we do make have a lot of depth to them, have a lot of context, right?
Yeah, that's true. Listening to you, I realized that you're someone who's into like taking impromptu decisions and going ahead and doing it. So do you think writing is also one of those decisions and, publishing a book?
Yeah, definitely. It pretty much aligns with that. So I've always I've always journaled. I have journals like throughout my whole life. I'm a big I love to reflect, kind of look back. I have a lot of nostalgic feelings. I hate nostalgia, but I go through it quite frequently because I overthink, right? So I started as a journal, which then turned into a blog. And then I kind of took a break and then went back to journaling. And then this past year just was a really big year for me. And I was actually driving with my now husband to Tahoe and just started writing. I mean, for like 30 hours straight. I just puked all my thoughts on there. And it was kind of one of the ways I was like praying that my brain would shut down and stop thinking. I'm like, if I put it on paper, that gives myself permission to stop thinking about it? And so that's why I did it. And it just kind of tumbled into this really awesome, it was like definitely like a live time thought, like reading the book even my parents, like I didn't really let anybody read it until I published it. None of my family, nobody. And even when I read back through, I was like, man, this is kind of like oddly interconnected for someone that just like vomited their thoughts on paper. And so, yeah, and then I considered publishing, but I like using a publisher, but I decided to self-publish just because I wanted to try it and see what happened. It's
Mhm,
definitely not for the weak. It's tricky. You don't have you're kind of winging it, to be honest. That's what I'm doing, winging it.
mhm.
Um, as I write more books, I've found a real passion for it. I might explore publishing options, but I think you have to have a lot of credibility and there's just a lot of hoops to jump through. And I just didn't want to lose the rights to my book in case another opportunity arose because that was a decision I wasn't ready to make. There's a good one because I just didn't know what was coming my way. So,
Yeah, well, I'm a self-published author myself, and one thing that I realized as soon as I entered the pool of self-publishing is that writing a book is far broader than just writing a book. Writing a book, when you're a writer, it is natural to you. The marketing process, taking it to the readers, is the
oh,
hardest
yeah.
job. So, have you planned out anything for that?
Yeah. So this is a side hustle. I was a therapist full time and then I'm an executive director of a hospice. And so my company is very interconnected, has a lot of leadership. So I have LinkedIn. I had a bigger platform on LinkedIn. I wasn't big into social media prior to this book. And social media is I love it for what it is, but it's not my favorite because it once again prompts overthinking.
Yeah.
So going into it, my goal was to build a community that was just super organic. I wanted people that actually, it's easy to grow followers that aren't engaged, but I wanted people that, I naturally connected with. So I actually have, matched with and other indie authors that, it's interesting. I feel like there's not a lot of people that write books that are very self-help geared in the indie author world. And that's where I'm finding opportunity, I should say, to kind of connect with others. It's funny because people ask me, like, hey, how'd you self-publish? Like, how'd you do this? And I'm like, I winged it, dude. I don't know. I Googled it and then I just like submitted my book and it worked out and it's going well. But so I wouldn't say my marketing plan's winging it. I'm really trying to connect with like people like you guys that are indie authors that can relate in the same way, as a person that's growing in their career. I really want to connect with other people that we can bring that whole emotional intelligence person into leadership. I think there's a lot of leadership books out there. There's a lot of self-help books out there. There are not a lot that bring it together from an organic, like vulnerable place. And so the book it's not that deep is just so unique. And so like my marketing strategy is kind of blazing my own trail, which is even harder, right? Because nobody knows what I'm talking about. And then I try to talk about it and then I feel like I'm over talking or like rambling like right now. But so with work, we have a lot of leadership opportunity. I have a lot of coworkers that have been very invested in the book, which has been super cool. I feel like I'm actually booked for a speaking event in January. I live in Tucson, Arizona, and I applied. There's a book festival, like a really large one, I guess. So I applied to be an indie author at that. And so just kind of trying to find organic opportunity that comes my way. I mean, my long-term goal, I'd love to sell 1,000 books. I'd love to of this book, and then I'd love to release my next book. With a little bit more credibility to me and maybe using a smaller publisher because I feel like it's still a valuable experience.
Yeah.
I feel like the best way with the book, and if you've read it, it's very vulnerable, but it's not like, I feel like it's surface level vulnerability though. It's not like I'm telling you my whole life story. It's more so like these are similar experiences we all have. And so I'm hoping the more that people read that and can relate,
Hmm.
that word of mouth kind of spreads because I feel like that's the only genuine way people are going to connect to this book.
That's true.
Otherwise, it's going to feel forced and it kind of defeats the purpose. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So a
Yeah, I
slow
get
burn. Slow burn, is that the word?
Yeah, that's the way Gen Z would put it. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
Khadija had another
Yeah,
question. Yeah.
I have this question. How do you think your book, It's Not That Deep, will impact the reader, especially those who are struggling with anxiety or overthinking?
Yeah. Uh, I think it's actually realizing that we're all human and like it's completely normal. Like it's completely normal to be anxious. It's completely normal to have bad days. It's completely normal to be disappointed in your own unrealistic expectations, and you're not alone.
Mhm.
And I think we know that, but we don't know that, right? I think our generation, millennials, Gen Z, right, we're the first to kind of reach out and talk about this. I think historically, leadership doesn't incorporate the whole person. You come to work and you leave your personal life at home and you're a different person at work. And I don't do that well. I'm just me all the time, and sometimes to a fault, right? And sometimes I'm too honest, and sometimes, but like that's who we are. And I feel like if you're putting more energy in being someone you're not, then how can you put that energy towards being your best self, right? And so I think it's going to be a holistic shift. I don't think it's a once, we have these self-help books that are like, well, if you just, start a calendar every day, you're going to be great. Like that's not true. It's not true. I think it takes a lot of pieces, and it's going to take a lot of us to understand that like we are all human. We all have our own walks of life. We all come from different paths, and that's great. And we should use those to our strengths. We should use those perspectives towards our strengths, right? And really start accepting people as the whole person. You don't have to go to work and be this stuffy, cold, unemotional person. You can be emotional and have passion without letting it consume you or consume your audience, right? So I think there's a fine line because I think sometimes people will get overly emotional and then get their point will get lost and then people can't even be around that person. In the book, I kind of refer to that person as a hurricane. Like, they're coming, it's going to give you anxiety. You're bracing for impact, and then you have to pick up the pieces when they're gone, right? So let's not be that person. Let's be someone that is compassionate and relates to other people and is authentically themselves. But also, let's wrap that in with logic and strategy and goals and, really treat people as people. Because when you invest in other people, those stronger connections are what's going to propel you to grow forward, right? Or maybe shift your perspective. You think you have it all figured out, and without these opportunities of getting to know other people, you don't even know what other options are out there, right? And so I think it's a movement, which is why these kinds of books are newer, because we've never really looked at leadership as a personal experience. But I personally don't know how you can grow just professionally and not personally. Like, how can you separate those things within yourself? I can't. So maybe other people can, and I'm behind the ball. But for those of you that relate to this, that's how I think it's going to roll.
That's true. That's really great.
Very
Well,
insightful.
yeah.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the next book that I want to write will probably go more personal than professional.
Mhm.
Um, there's another part of the book that kind of feeds into that. I have a chapter called vulnerability, which is my least favorite thing to be because for me, being vulnerable makes me anxious. Like it, whew. And then I feel like I start saying stuff I didn't want to say in the first place, and you're like, why am I still talking? And so I talk about the difference between being vulnerable, which has a lot of emotion and rawness involved, versus being transparent. And I think when you're transparent, you allow people to see you, whereas when you're vulnerable, you're attaching some heavy emotion to that. And um, I think vulnerability is great if it's not weaponized. Like let's not trauma dump on people and ask them to hold all this heaviness with me. I think transparency is letting people see that walk of life and doing it with you without feeling responsible. And that's a high level of emotional intelligence that I don't even think, I mean, if we're like our parents didn't know how to do that. Our parents we didn't talk about it. So now we're all like, okay, so how do we all relate without weighing each other down?
Yeah, that's true. Well, you talked about your second book. Have you already started to write it? Have you planned out when you'll publish it?
Yeah, a little bit. Well, I've written quite a bit. So when I write, my writing process is I just like live time type all my thoughts out, and then I just constantly review over and over. I try to walk away and come back. And when I write a book, I want time to pass just because I feel like that perspective and you never know. You'd hate to publish a book and be like woulda, coulda, shoulda. And so I'm about over 100 pages in, so I'm pretty well in. It's gonna be I have it kind of framed out. I'm sure it'll take a couple turns. I'm trying to not. I want to see where this book goes before I plan the next one, like marketing strategies and such.
Yeah.
But it's going to be related to this book. I kind of want the books to be interchangeable, where you could pick one and read either one. They obviously go together, but they're not chronological.
Mhm.
So, like, you might feel like it's not that deep, is kind of, hey, you're in a good headspace, you've been through it, right? The other book is like, you're in the thick of it, what's going on,
Yeah.
And so being able to pick one that relates to where you're at in
Mhm.
that time of your life. My goal was for the books to kind of be timeless, and I I feel like that did come out pretty well with this one. And so that's what I'm trying to replicate with the next one. I have a lot of Easter eggs between the two that kind of relate to each other. And like when I released this book, I had an expert excerpt in my paragraph of my Instagram post from my old book or from my new book. So
Mhm.
I've been hinting it, but I just don't know. I haven't even had this book out a month yet, so it's kind of crazy to be thinking that far ahead already, you know? I'm
Yeah.
trying to live in the present and not just zoom past it because I tend to do that.
Yeah. Khadija,
Okay, so
yeah.
there's this one thing that it comes with overthinking. It's negative thinking.
Right.
At least for me personally, I think when I overthink, the cherry on the top is negative thinking. So I think when people are stuck, just a minute, is there too much noise? Can you hear me?
Yeah, the dogs are audible.
Yeah, that's
That's
something that you.
that's okay. We'll just do
Okay.
anything.
Okay. So when people are stuck, negative thinking or self doubt, what would be your top advice to them?
Yeah. I think once again, is have a very clear identity of like who you are and what you want. And if you're feeling like you're caught up in those negative thoughts because they come in waves typically, is to refer back to who you know you are, right? Like you might have some negative other, I don't know, voices, people around you. First of all, if it's people, maybe don't be around those people. Obviously, we can't always pick our environment. You can't always pick the people you're around. And I don't want to confuse negativity for feedback. Like just because it disagrees with you doesn't make it negative, right? But when we are in those kind of places, I think it's a really good time to stop and reflect. So I'll always say like float or paddle, right? Like are you floating and looking around or are you paddling towards a direction? And so I think when we get in those overthinking negative uh, situations, it's good just to take a moment and really realign yourself with your core. What are you doing right? What do you know to be true about yourself? What in your environment is making you feel negative? And if that's the case, like remove yourself from your environment, realign yourself, and come back to it in a positive mindset. I don't think, and positive doesn't mean like rainbows and butterflies, right? Because that's not real. Positive just means putting our energy in a productive scenario instead of tearing ourselves down, which is easier said than done, or others, right? And so I think it's just when I think of positive or negative, I'm not thinking like good or bad. I'm thinking what's taking me towards my goals and what's taking my energy away from my goals. Um, and I think some of it's unavoidable. You know, you get these self-help books that are like, well, if you do it, all this will go away and everything's going to be great. Like, yeah, no, you know, I wrote this book and silly me, I'm writing this. I'm like, oh, I'm doing so great. Like, wow, I've really grown. Like, I've come so far. I'm an expert. And like a month after publishing the book, I'm like rereading the chapters, like, yeah, I still don't do this really well. Like, I need to take my own advice. Right. And so I think that's kind of the joke of it. Like, you can publish all these strategies, but then it comes back to it and you're like, wait, no, I'm not very good at it either. Um, one of those books, one of the chapters for me, there's a couple, but the other one is called Timing is Everything. And I you kind of gathered like I don't take a lot of time. I'm a trial and error bulldozer kind of gal. Like I just want to get stuff done. And I know I can, but the world or whatever the forces may be sometimes have a different plan, right? Or like things happen and the timing of your choices aren't working themselves out. And that doesn't mean you failed. And that doesn't mean you're in the wrong place. And it doesn't mean, you know, you need to do a doom loop spiral or really reevaluate yourself. Like sometimes that means you just float and you just let life go. And that's not to be confused with opportunity to be like hypercritical of ourselves or to be, overthinking. That is time to literally embrace the peace and know that there's probably another season of life coming your way to take those steps. And that's kind of how I would approach it. Or
Yeah.
I try to personally. It works sometimes.
Well, now that you've published your book and it's out there, and now that you want to be a full-time author, do you?
No, I really love my job. I love
Uh-huh.
people management. I another part of my book, I'm really big into diverse. I have a lot of drive, always have. And so I kind of have to have diverse interests because it's enough to drive people crazy, including myself. So I think I'll always write books. I would love I like applying it to the professional development just because I think a lot of us have a drive,
Mhm,
for a career. But I really want it to be all encompassing and a place that anybody can relate to and take something from it. So probably not full time. I would love to have a career, but also be probably 50-50 invested. I'd love to have talking opportunities. I would like to publish another book. I have a lot of like dreams. I'm just trying to make sure I don't do it all at once. I want it to be meaningful and I want to make sure I have the right audience to bring it to life with.
mhm. So you just want to continue in this self-help genre, or do you want to write in some other genre and, just explore it?
I probably, knowing me, I'll probably shift.
Mhm.
I'll probably shift and do, you'll never know what you're gonna get with me. That's kind of the fun of it, right? I'll probably shift. The next book will be similar. I could see myself, you know, God, I could go 100 different ways. I don't know. I mean,
Mhm,
I know the next book. I know the marketing strategy I have behind that, but I have a feeling, and I don't, there's no data to back this, that it'll probably evolve into something more.
mhm,
I kind of want to learn a little bit more about myself and what interests people before putting all my eggs in one basket, you know?
mhm. That's fair. Okay, so with this, I think we're approaching the end of the podcast. Do you have anything you want to say to your readers? Anything you want to tell them in the end?
Yeah, honestly, like for those of you that have read the book, thank you so much. I appreciate you. If you do read the book, please reach out, tell me your experience. Like that's a huge reason I wrote the book is just to connect and learn from others.
Mhm,
If you're a younger leader, you know, I really don't don't get so caught up in the idea of it that you stunt your growth. Just because you don't have it figured out right now doesn't mean you're not meant for something greater. And, that's easier said than done. And I'm speaking to myself too. Uh, there's this unique timing that none of us have figured out. And I think just every small step and consistency forward and keeping your energy directed on the right thing for you, not what other people define as right, but what you think is right is going to get you where you need to go. And I look forward to, keep writing and connecting with you guys. And I appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast while you
Thanks
guys
for
are
coming.
here.
It was great having you here.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys so much. Good luck with
Yeah,
everything.
thank you.